Hi, I'm Erica of Grapefruit and Gardenia Designs and the Knit Kind podcast. You can find me on Ravelry as Knitty Elf, Knitty ELF 40, and you'll find projects and my designs detailed there. So, for those of you who haven't watched before, maybe this is your first podcast, I thought I would do a little reminder about what the Knit Kind podcast is and what it isn't. What it is just a very informal, usually not a lot of post-production editing, chat to listen to while you're knitting. I know I discovered podcasts while I was knitting, and some of them are long, some are short, all different things. Some are formal, informal. They're all neat. I love the ones where I can get some tips, and my goal and what I'm trying to add to the community is just to really come at it with a lens of kindness. I know we all know that there is so much going on in the world every day and in our microcosm, local lives, our personal lives, our family lives. And we could talk about all of that. What I'm trying to do is just focus on kindness and positivity in the knitting community. So I hope that you'll join me. I'm always interested in feedback and suggestions for topics. I started with a little bit about my knitting journey and then different things that have been of interest to me, whether it's color work, fiber arts and learning to spin. Did I say color work already? I probably did. I did one episode on socks, which is not my specialty, but I learned a lot about it and it was really fun to do that. And so as we go, I'll try to put in different things that I've enjoyed learning about. Today, what I want to talk about is this cowl. This is my new release pattern. Just on Wednesday afternoon, I released it this week, and it's called the Nourishment cowl. And if you've seen some of my other designs or knitted any of my patterns, you'll probably see a theme that I like to really do a lot behind what is my inspiration for a design, be it artistic or beyond artistic. Sometimes what I mean by artistic is I'll see a yarn and it really calls to me of how to create. Other times I'll see something in nature and replicate it in a design, or not replicate, but sort of echo it, see it as inspiration. Other times I guess it's more of a feeling. And this is a little bit of everything. So I thought I would take the time to share that with you today, and maybe it inspires you to knit it. Maybe it inspires you to design something yourself. Maybe it inspires you just to share it or to check out some of the stories that are behind it. So the Nourishment cowl, I also want to mention, if you do go to Ravelry, which is where it's available now, you can get 10% off the pattern through the month. Oh my goodness. It's almost the end of October. I think I did through the month of October, so that's coming up pretty quickly. You can have 10% off with the code FARMLOVE, FARMLOVE, all capital letters. And it will eventually be in some other places as well, but if you're not a Ravelry user, you can email me or contact me through my social media to find out about the pattern. I usually upload them on Lovecrafts as well, but this one has not been made or tested with yarns on Lovecraft, so usually I wait until either I or someone else can do that, or I can identify, at least through swatching, what a good yarn would be that they sell so that I can put the pattern there as well. So the inspiration for Nourishment cowl was twofold. What I will talk about a few times is Junction fiber mill, the people behind it, and the yarn, because it was really a duality there. And I first discovered their yarn at the Wayland Winter Farmers Market Farm Fiber Days, mouthful. I've mentioned that show a number of times. And I saw it there and it was gorgeous, and the booth was mobbed the first time I saw it. And I sort of made a mental note and I went around and I had a very casual visit that time. And then the next time I went, I had talked to a couple of people in between who raved about the yarn and said, you know, it's not just another long color changing yarn, it's special. And when someone says that, there are so many yarns, right? And there are so many small businesses. And something in my brain said, you got to go back and really look at that. So the next time I was at the market, I did. And I decided It was, of course, so many gorgeous choices. And I thought, what one speaks to me the most? So I'm actually wearing a version of this, but this is not the prototype. This was my prototype here. And the long color change that is in between this naturally colored wool is Junction Fiber Mills making tracks in the color Berry Jam. I love berries. I love jam. Jam is one of my favorite things to give as a thoughtful gift to someone, whether it's a hostess gift or a gift to perk someone up or at the holidays. I love to give homemade jam, homemade honey, apple butter, banana butter, not homemade by me, but homemade by people who that is their specialty as opposed to mine, which mine would probably be knitting. I guess they both take a long time in a different way. So berry jam. You can see in the natural light today how gorgeous these colors are. And of all the berries, raspberry is my favorite, blackberry is my husband's favorite, strawberry is my son's favorite. So we've got it covered. Blueberry, well, I have some good stories about blueberries too. But anyway, berry jam. So I kind of see this as going from like a blackberry raspberry or a black raspberry through, there's your blueberry, and it's just a colorway that I think is stunning. It so happened that at the same farmer's market, I was very curious to try knitting with Finn sheep wool. Finnish Landress is this specifically. And this is from a farm in Massachusetts, meadow-fed lamb. And they made this worsted weight yarn. And this is a natural color. I believe this one is called Badger Gray. They had 3 different colors, I think, or 4, different shades. It's a limited production yarn for sure. But wherever is local to you, you probably have access, and if you don't, you have it through the internet, to either local farms or maybe farms that are local to somewhere special for you. So I'm in Massachusetts, Junction Fiber Mill is in Vermont. We have the New England Fiber Festival coming up the first weekend of November. A lot of you just went to Rhinebeck, or New York Sheep and Wool. There's Maryland Sheep and Wool. And then, of course, on the West Coast, you have access to tons of wonderful farm yarns as well. So whatever you choose, there are tips in my pattern about finding a comparable yarn. And the reason I tested this one is because in this one, the natural wool is the Junction Fiber Mill blend. But if you go to their website and you look under farm fresh yarns, I think pretty much anything there is going to work. You're going to have slight variations with gauge, which is going to mean slight variations with fit. But you can either do the math and do a gauge swatch and calculate that, or you can somewhat adjust as you go, since this is an accessory with a little bit more wiggle room on gauge than maybe a sweater. And I'll give you some tips about that as we continue to talk about it. So heavy DK, light worsted, even a full worsted, it's just going to fit. It's going to be a little bit bigger, and that's fine with an accessory like this. Where you'll want to adjust potentially is the neck. You might want to knit the neck on a smaller needle size if you're working with a bigger yarn or a bigger gauge. And again, I'll talk about that in a minute. So I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but back to the inspiration. I was at the festival. I wanted to try Finn yarn. I grabbed that. I wanted to try the Junction Fiber Mill making tracks. I grabbed that. I don't think I realized at the time, but the meadow-fed lamb yarn was spun at Junction Fiber Mill. So I thought it made a great story. I loved the pairing together. I like things that are high contrast and low contrast. It's equal opportunity in my book when you're working with color work. It just depends on, does it fit the project? So I had these yarns and I kept looking at them and trying to think, like, what does this want to become? And I didn't want the pressure of feeling like I had to do it before it spoke to me and told me what it wanted to become. So I had seen this is called Florentine Frieze. And I had seen this pattern or stitch pattern in some designs that I had liked or favorited. And I wasn't really sure that I wanted to knit someone else's design with this yarn, but I thought, well, maybe. And then I was looking through the Barbara Walker stitch books to think about, well, what else would I like it as? And I saw the Florentine frieze there, and it just caught my eye again. And those books are in black and white. So I had now seen this Florentine frieze in color. I had seen it in black and white. And I said, this is it. I don't know what it's going to become, though. I didn't design the whole thing first. I started with the Florentine frieze. And I actually ended up putting it down for quite a while in between because I just couldn't decide. And sometimes that happens. It's part of the process. So as I was thinking about this, I started watching the Junction Fiber Mill Millcast. Many of you are probably fans of it. And if you're not, check it out, because if knitting is more than making stitches to you, if it's about stories and relationships and love and wool and things that you're passing on or making special gifts or heirloom pieces for your family, that's a millcast for you. I think a podcast for you, which is the millcast. So in my pattern, it will tell you exactly which episode, and in the Ravelry page as well. So you don't have to buy my pattern to find this out. But if you go to the Ravelry page for the pattern, it will tell you the episode where you can find the story of Peggy and Amanda, who are the co-owners of Junction Fiber Mill, and hear their origin story. There is an empowering story about women in business. There is a life lesson about jumping in and taking chances and following your heart. And then there is a story about specifically how they came to be business partners. And if you are an emotional person, I dare you to watch it and not tear up at least, or be inspired by it. So check that out. So as I was doing this and watching the Millcast, I thought, okay, I think something's starting to click. Something's starting to come to me. And I brought it with me on vacation, where I like to do a lot of inspired thinking, inspired knitting. I usually get through a craft show that I run, and after that, I sort of have clear space to just play. I'll put a lifeline in whatever I'm doing, or I'll start a new design, or I'll start some swatches. And if it totally stinks at the end, I'll trash it. But it was like space that I got to create. And if it doesn't, then I usually end up with something special. And that's how I designed my Aquina Cowl last year. So this year, I had this, I had watched their story, I had felt the yarn. I know that I like this style where I love shawls too, but I can't always get them to stay on right. I've tried the pins, I've tried the buttons, I've tried the shawl cuffs, and sometimes I just want to throw something on and not have to be bothered with any of that, right? So this design works for me. So again, I went through and said, now I know I love the Florentine frieze with this. What other stitches to me signify what I'm trying to capture in this cowl? And I started looking at other things I'd made before, and of course the stitch books, and also thinking about how do relationships and partnerships grow, and how is that connection to farm yarns something that I can make all come together. So I looked at seed stitch, right? Seeds are the very essence of how things start to grow in many cases, in plants and people. And so what you'll see in the cowl is I had started with a seed stitch border at the top, worked through the Florentine frieze, and then you'll see I went back to seed stitch here as I started my increases. So I went through seed stitch, just a little band of it, because again, I didn't want it to be something, you'll see here, it pops out, and sometimes it will, gather a little bit around the seed stitch. So I didn't want a really big section. I just did this little section here. And then I knew I wanted to really feature the color changing yarns. And, we're getting some nice light through the window right now to show you that. And actually, let me put my hand behind it so that you can see the yarn overs there. So that stitch I had done in a shawl, and I'm going to show you that shawl because I remember when I knitted it, So many people commented and said, can you please put up a tutorial for how you did the beam stitch? And of course, I just followed the directions, which were very clear in the pattern. The pattern is called Fancy Me. And this is it. I'm sorry, it's been folded and put away. But this is the Fancy Me shawl. And actually, this is one of my favorite shawls to wear because it is a great size. Here, I'm layering now, but it's a great size. It stays on. It doesn't go anywhere. I can shawl cuff it. I can pin it. I don't have to. So I get many compliments when I wear this. And here you'll see, there's my beam stitch. This one is in Sueño yarn, which is a gorgeous, gorgeous yarn. And you can actually mix it like this one. I have DK and fingering mixed together, and probably some sport and many different plies and textures, and it all works in this gorgeous shawl. So check out the Fancy Me, spelled M-E-E shawl, which I'm going to talk about more in a minute. And know that this is where I got the inspiration for these beam stitches. They are so similar in many ways to other stitches that I've done. And look at when you see the whole row of them. Isn't that great? But I looked and I looked and I looked and I looked, and I couldn't find them in any stitch dictionary. I couldn't find tutorials for videos online, which often you can. And I thought, well, I guess I will reach out to the designer, whose name is Sabine Walther. She goes by Fitzy Creative. F-R, did I say Fitzy? I meant Fritzy. If I said Fitzy, you'll know I'm from Boston, I guess. So Fritzy Creative, F-R-I-T-I-Z-I, C-R-E-A-T-I-V. And I reached out and I told her how much I loved the shawl and loved the stitch, and that I was planning to use it in one of my designs, but I couldn't find it in a stitch dictionary anywhere. And if by chance she had made it up, I wanted to make sure that I credited her, and also that she was okay with me using it in the pattern. Generally, when people make stitches, they are meant to be used in other things, right? Like it's a stitch, and you can own copyright on a pattern. You can own copyright on, I'm not a patent lawyer here, but you can own copyright on things, but like even a pattern, it's meant to be made, and you don't own copyright on the thing that is made in the end. So I was very, very pleased that she responded. She was enthusiastic to have me include the stitch in my pattern. And I hope it will be rising tide lifts all ships, because when I used the stitch, I knitted it in the round. Hers is knitted flat, which means now the stitch she created is now out there in the world with an in the round version as well, which, if you're a knitter or a designer, if you haven't thought about it before as a knitter, obviously your instructions are different, and charting is one of those things that similarly flat in the round. Now, I don't believe her stitch was charted when it was flat, but I almost always in my patterns try to include both charted and written instructions, especially for color work and then for lace. So I converted her stitch pattern to be knitted in the round, and I added a chart, and I added an instructional video on knitting the way, if you can, actually I'll hold the other one up, you can see better, I think, the way that this is knitted here. You're going through each of those yarn over holes and knitting these elongated stitches. So now I have a video for that too, and I hope that it helps. Granted, in the round it's different from flat, but I do hope that that helps some people who are knitting the Fancy Me shawl, which is a free pattern, so check it out. It's a gift to the knitting world. And I hope it helps some people who are doing that pattern as well, and we can really help each other and feature each other. And I am happy to shine a light on her beautiful stitch design. And I also have a tip in mind. On hers, on the wrong side of the work is where you're bringing all those elongated stitches together. On mine, you're doing it on the right side of the work because you're knitting in the round. So you're only working on the right side here. And so when I get to the point that I bring these stitches together, we are doing down here, knit 7 together. I don't know about you, but if I, especially as a new knitter, picked something up and it said knit 7 stitches together, I'd think, you have got to be kidding me. But you learn tips and tricks as you go. And you can knit 7 stitches together with a crochet hook like nothing. Now, I wouldn't want to do it for an entire sweater probably, but for one round to get a gorgeous stitch like this, I think it's worth it. So in my pattern, I have video tutorials and then I have picture tutorials. And the photo tutorial for the knit 7 together takes you through each step of how to do that with a crochet hook. I think I put some pictures on my Instagram too. So I don't have a video of that one, but I think the pictures are even more effective because you can really stop and see each step of that along the way. So why that? Well, we go from this pattern, which I knew I loved with a long color change, to the seeds. And what happens when seeds are put into the ground? They grow, right? Whether or not they blossom, not everything blossoms, but they do grow. And so to me, this beam stitch, it almost looks like a peacock here also, but it's that signifying of growth between people, between plants, on the farm, in nature in general. And so then I knew I wanted to have a pattern. I really like balance as well. It doesn't have to be symmetry, but I like balance. And so I have my Florentine frieze. You can see that way that, actually it's a little bit hard to see here, but if you look close, you'll see that this shape here, again, sort of reminds me of something coming up through the earth. And then you've got the growth with the beam stitch. So I repeated then a seed stitch, and then I repeated the Florentine frieze, repeated the seed stitch. And the idea is nourishing relationships and nourishing the earth, taking care of one another, and celebrating what we can do together in that way. So those were, I want to make sure I got everything, but those were my inspiration for the stitches. I did not name this first. I named it afterwards. And many things go through your head when you're doing a design sometimes, and sometimes you have a design and at the end you're trying to find the right name for it. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my naming process too. I have a head that often thinks in music. I'll be doing something. I am not musical, cannot carry a tune to save my life. Played the flute in elementary school. I don't think that's going to get me very far. But I love listening to music, and when I listen to music, it instantly takes me to a memory if I have one associated with it. So as I was doing this, all I could think of was seeds and love. So sowing the seeds of love, right? And you think, oh, I've got it. This one's going to be so fun. And then you go to Ravelry and you start looking for if anybody else has done it. Well, don't you know, Joji Locatelli beat me to the punch on that one. And I was actually just looking at calling it Seeds of Love Cowl. She has Sowing the Seeds of Love and talks about the song in it. So I thought, I'm going to take that as a compliment. Great minds think alike. We're probably of the same age, give or take a little bit. And then I kept thinking, what else can I possibly name it? So I had this handwritten list, which now I have on here because I wanted to share it with you. And you just do this free flow brainstorm, stream of consciousness, like write it all down because it might sound great and then it turns out it's not great, or it might sound horrible and then later you go back and you like it. So here's a little bit of my list for naming the cowl in honor of Peggy and Amanda, farm yarn, making tracks, and just all being together and growing together. Germination cowl, flourish, nourish, destiny, coincidence, intention, happenstance, purposeful, conjunction, because that would have been cool with Junction Fiber Mill, right? I don't know. Correlation, synchronicity, confluence, promise, soulmate, kindred, dependable, reliable, trust. Then I got into some fancy ones. Elan vital, that was interesting for a while, but I decided it was a little too iffy. Emergence, and then Albright. And when I was looking at this list earlier, I thought, Albright, like, where did that come from in there? I think where it came from is, it is still one of my favorite quotes, but it's probably been maybe used in politics in a way that I don't want to judge anyone's politics out there, although I do have strong values and beliefs. I think a lot of us share commonalities between values and beliefs, and sometimes there's no question that things with politics can lead to conversations that aren't always productive. So, Albright, it was Madeleine Albright, and her quote about women who don't support other women. So, I saw Peggy and Amanda as women who do, and that was really important to her. It's really important to me. I have learned in my professional life and my personal life how meaningful and not common it always is for women to support other women. So I was looking at Albright as well as a possibility. That was a long way to tell you that. But anyway, what I went with was Nourishment Cowl. It's not that nothing out there is named Nourishment or Nourish. There's more Nourish than Nourishment. But the whole point is we really do thrive when we support each other, and that's what I would like to see more of. That's what I want to do for Junction Fiber Mill and places like Meadow-Fed Lamb and farms that are doing things like that everywhere. And also I should mention that in this one, the color changing yarn here is actually Feederbrook Farms, which if you're local to the Mid-Atlantic area, that's, you know, one of your local farm mill opportunities. There are many others, but let me just show you. This is the Feederbrook with the mill blend from Junction Fiber Mill. And this is the full height. You can knit the top to 6 inches or 5 inches, or frankly, wherever you're comfortable with. It tells you what rows you want to stop on. I'm going to see if I can do a really quick change here and show you how the other one fits. This one is all DK, so it's a little bit smaller, but not much. And this one is the worsted with the DK. See, it's just a little bit bigger. And if you do it all in worsted, it'll be a little bit bigger, and that's okay too. And see here, this one stands up quite well. This is obviously a non-superwash wool. I don't think the Making Tracks. I think the Making Tracks is also non-superwash, but I know for sure that the farm yarn is non-superwash. So see how it really stands up? I think I knitted the top of this one on a 6 and the bottom on a 7. I'm a continental knitter. If anything, I'm usually sizing down needles with very few exceptions. A couple designers are looser than I am, and I will size up needles, but most of the time I'm sizing down. And see, it just really, it's like a nice, thick, strong fabric, and it's not scratchy. Obviously, everyone has their opinions, but I'll tell you, when I wear this, it feels as soft as a standard merino. I mean, it's not scratchy at all. It is not ultra soft like some other things I have shown you for sure, but it's not scratchy. And this one's not scratchy either. This one is a little bit more farmy, I would say. But anyway, I'm just showing you that so you can see. You can modify the height here. If you want it shorter, you can do that. I was actually going to make it shorter in the pattern, and people convinced me, no, put it long, let that breeze stay out, and let people decide. So maybe I'll just leave this one on for the rest. You don't need to see me do another costume change here. So I love this pattern. I'm not just saying that because it's my own. I only try to share things with you that I do love. And I'm excited to get to go to the open house at the mill in November and bring these with me and show them off, because I love them. I love everything about the yarn. If I haven't said it enough, the people, and so on. So thank you for giving me that inspiration. I'm popping over now to my Ravelry page for Nourishment Cowl, which has both examples here. Testers are still adding. I know I have one who's probably going to listen to this podcast at some point, and she is working in Vermont Vice. So I can't wait to see that one pop. I've seen it through about here, I think. And the pink, the bright pink is coming out right in these sections. So it's perfect for her, for anybody who wants to wear that bright pink, but it's going to look stunning on her. And in here, I just want to make sure that I shared everything with you. But I think the only thing left is just to tell you a little bit about, gauge and the flexibility there. And thanks to all of my testers, because they gave me some great feedback about having some extra notes in the pattern. So I hope you'll consider knitting it. I hope you'll watch the Junction Fiber Mill Millcast and their story. I hope wherever is local to you, you will find some farm yarn and support your local farms. And if you want to knit this with other yarns, you don't have one of the color changing, maybe it's not in a price range you can in your budget right now, you can also use scraps from other projects where you can control what colors you have in what sections, right? There's a little unpredictability when you do this. But if you are using any of the countdown calendars, if you're using scraps from other projects, if you're using hand spun yarn of your own or minis, this is absolutely great. Play around with it and just put that in for your contrast color. And then I would still recommend picking one solid color throughout, but you don't have to. You can make it a carnival of color if you want. So thank you again for watching. Knit kindly, live kindly, do something nice for someone else today, and be well.